Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi and I spend a lot of time here at the Stronghold presenting various budget builds, be it for the general standard meta or maybe a specific midweek Magic event. But recently I was asked by one of my viewers to compile a complete video showing multiple ways of building those decks from the ground up. So, Roberto, this one's for you. But before we get into all that, let's not forget that Ether Drift is a story of speed and competition, sometimes with violent consequences, and of course, it's also a love story. But perhaps most importantly, it's a great little reminder that you need to race right over to my Twitch affiliate channel and subscribe right away, because not only do I stream over there 3 or more times a week on average, there is a 2-week video on demand archive for you, all absolutely free. Link in the description. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Alright, so we're going to start off the conversation with what I lovingly refer to as option 0. And I do so because the only thing you really have to do here is be patient. Because this is all about the resources that you get even as a brand new player on Arena. Everyone basically gets the same things, and using these correctly in your early days and not using more advanced resources is really the best approach to help you get a good start on Arena. Pretty much everyone starts with 5 monocolor starter decks that you use to play through the color challenge. And to be honest, most of these decks are not particularly good. They are here to teach you basic skills and color pie aspects, meaning that each color does certain things well and other things not very well. For instance, the blue deck is very well built around flyers, whereas the mono green deck is very weak to flyers, only having a few creatures that can even deal with them. You're going to outgrow these fairly quickly, learn what you can, and the sad fact is, at any given time, the vast majority of these cards are not even legal in Standard, but that doesn't mean they won't serve their purposes in other places. From there, you will graduate almost immediately to your 10 two-color pair starter decks. And these tend to change from year to year historically here on the Arena, but I think the introduction of foundations to be, well, just that, a foundational set on the Arena, we're going to see more stability within this, more than likely a couple of cards out of any given deck changing from year to year. But in any given year, out of those 10 decks, about 3 of them tend to be pretty good. About 3 of them tend to be pretty bad, and you guessed it, that leaves about 4 that are a little mediocre at best. The nice thing about this is everyone starts with the same resources. There are clear winners. I give my thoughts on this at any given set of deck releases as to which I think are the best and the least, etc., etc. So if you haven't seen that already, make sure to check that out. You can even use these for your early grinding through the starter deck duel, where you will use an exact copy of one of these starter decks to go up against a real-life opponent who is also wielding a starter deck that hasn't been altered in any way, shape, or form. This is the closest thing you can get to an absolutely fair, balanced match. But don't forget, some of those decks are better than others, so choosing wisely here is a really good alternative. But of course, these decks also you will outgrow fairly quickly. And I want to caution you because you will find a lot of what I would call well-meaning content creators offering easy, quick upgrade paths for these 10 decks. But be aware that once you do them, you will more than likely find that most of the resources you spent to upgrade these decks to even their optimal levels could have been better spent somewhere else, because even optimal versions of these decks are not super great. More often than not, mixing and matching the right cards from your starter collection and maybe early upgrades will get you a lot more mileage than these so-called upgrade avenues. And as we begin to wrap up your starter decks, if you were to scroll all the way to the very bottom of your decks, you're going to find that category, Historic Brawl Example Decks. And believe it or not, they gave you one of these. And even if you don't like the particular commander or the individual playstyle, these come with a ton of cards that, well, maybe not a ton, that might be an overstatement, but there's probably 6 to 8 very strong Brawl staples that should probably go in every single one of your Brawl decks till the end of time. And beyond that, each and every one of these have strong individual cards that could very easily fit into properly themed decks for various Eternal formats. And every once in a while, some of these cards are also standard legal. And lastly, new players can expect to receive 3 packs of every standard legal set. This is just a small boost to get you on your way to building customized decks. And of course, opening those early and right away is not at all a bad thing. There's no way to predict what you will get out of those individual packs, but at the early stages, almost any additional cards is good. The ones that you might want to think twice about opening would be whatever the current set is, as well as the Magic the Gathering Foundations. You might want to hold off on these packs until you have made broader decisions about buying packs as well as drafting those particular sets. Next up at number 1 is the place that you should probably really start to focus your time and energy, particularly the earlier you are in your arena career. This is a category that I refer to as limited resources because it is 100% focused on that. We want to be doing events like Jump In and Quick Draft in order to not only enjoy those play environments for their own worth, but potentially more importantly, adding new cards and resources to our collection so we can start to build more decks. These decks can start as simply as just tying together 3 color-aligned jump-in booster packs, or get as complicated as doing multiple quick drafts, typically about 3, in order to really start forming a coherent budget deck built around those draft archetypes. These will tend to be the strongest and most resilient, and of course, the more drafting you do, the more decks you will unlock. Probably the hardest part about learning limited resources is knowing when to stop, and in fact, I do a whole video just on that subject. When you are building and ultimately testing these decks that come from limited resources, there are 2 things that you are really looking for. Of course, the first is a deck that's fun and you enjoy playing, because it might be the best deck in the world, but if you aren't having fun, why are you doing it? The other, of course, is looking for win rates that are 55% or higher based on what limited resources you have put in. So if you've done, say, 3 drafts and your deck is only winning like 53% of the time, you probably need to stop there. There's going to be better choices, and there's no need to go any further. But of course, when you do find a deck that hits both of those categories for you, that's when you want to start considering it a tier 2 investment grade deck. That's right, we might start spending some stronger resources on this. And this can range as simply as looking at existing cards in your collection that have done well in past seasons, like upgrading your removal, for instance. This could also be done once you have finished drafting and you've gotten everything you can out of limited, you've started opening packs, so now you want to add 3rd and 4th copies of those key low rarity cards, like a signpost uncommon, or a key piece of removal from that particular set that maybe fits with the theme of the deck. This is also where you might want to make note of a particular jump-in pack to try and pick up in future seasons if maybe you're not quite ready to start spending wild cards, or maybe you didn't get everything that you wanted out of the packs that you opened. And of course, as I mentioned, wild cards start to be a real possibility here. You would be amazed how good it is to just spend a wild card on a couple of rares that fit nicely into a deck and help to grow your collection, even at a very meager stage. And of course, everyone's favorite advice to give is upgrading your land availability. And I have specific thoughts on that in other videos that we'll address. It is a good idea, but not always what you think it is. Once you have followed these first few deck building methods for a couple of seasons, you may find that the meta or your collection has grown in unexpected ways. So I recommend for your third deck building option to look for those hidden gems. And if you use an overlay like MtG Assistant, which I personally use and recommend at no personal gain of any kind, you can actually do this fairly easily. From the main screen up on the main menu here, if you click on Collection, and from there, Deck Advisor. And once it has pinged all the databases, it will actually populate first any decks that you already have all the cards for. And then as you move down the list, it will recommend additional decks based on the fewest number of wildcards coming first. As you can see here, this particular account can build Layla the Blade Reforged for Historic Brawl for the cost of one uncommon wildcard, specifically Throes of Chaos. Also for a mythic, I could build Crucius, Titan of Waves, also for Historic Brawl. Mono red, there's a 1% meta deck out there with a 61% win rate that I would need 5 commons and 6 uncommons. Not a bad investment. And you'll find little things like this. When I go through this, again, you want to look for decks that have an above 55% win rate. And until you get down here to Arabella, all of them do. And Arabella's not far off with 54. So, if you're looking for a fun deck, still something worth considering. And of course, you can tighten this down by selecting a specific format. You can look for decks that are specific colors, or you can even filter it by the percentage of which it's played as opposed to wild cards. But for the purposes that we're talking about today, I think wild cards is the way to go. The same screen will also give you a nice little handy reminder of exactly how many wild cards you have for any given account that you're analyzing. Last up, and arguably least, at least as far as importance for budget deck builders like ourselves, are meta decks. And this is when you are basically investing wild cards in what more often than not is someone else's developed list. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can get expensive if done too often or too wildly. And when it comes to things like the Pro Tour, meta deck lists are not at all hard to find. In fact, you really only have to go as far as the mothership, with links conveniently provided within the Arena client to get more deck lists than most people could possibly process through. A word of caution on these, particularly with items from the Pro Tour, is these deck lists are very often forged for a particular expected meta at that event, and may not necessarily do as well on, say, either the casual play or the more competitive rank queues on the Arena client. I would not consider crafting these without a strong understanding of the meta and why a particular deck did well on a particular day, because you may not find the same results for your individual needs. Once again, regardless of which format you're interested in, for a solid meta result, I would recommend going to MTG Assistant. This time around, you simply click on the meta at the main screen and then use the drop down to select what other format you are interested in. Do be aware that they still refer to Historic Brawl as the 100 card format and Brawl as the 60 card format, which the Arena client has changed their inclination on that within about the last year or so. So do know what you're looking at there. But beyond that, each deck is going to tell you a percentage of the meta in which it's being played, as well as the win condition, and a shortcut of what cards you are missing for a particular deck, as well as how it has shifted in playability within the meta over the last week. Obviously, green numbers being things that are trending up, red numbers tend to be things trending down. And of course, clicking on any of those deck lists on the assistant will take you over to EtherHub, where you will find the full downloadable deck list. And of course, if you are looking for more generalized guidelines on deck construction regarding things like land counts, creatures versus spell counts, etc., you can find a public to everyone post over on my Patreon addressing just that in a very simple to follow idea. And before we go, while every member of this community is important to me, I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to those patrons providing financial support and keeping the Stronghold from being a complete financial black hole. And of course, let me leave you with some suggestions for your next step here on the channel.